Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to our final session for the afternoon or for this morning session. We have one more session coming up later at 4 p.m. This session will feature a presentation by Professor Olayinka David West, Academic Director, Lagos Business School. And the focus will be on the role of organizational design for thriving fintech ecosystem, lessons from Lithuania, just give us an overview. Prof, if you can hear me, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this opportunity to share some lessons from a different fintech environment in general. So in the course of today, I'm just going to sort of present some preliminary findings of a study that we've been conducting around understanding the Lithuanian fintech ecosystem and also benchmarking against what we obtained in Nigeria. And I hope I'll get questions and comments that we can sort of add into the study to provide feedback. So the outline of today, I don't have very long, so I'm just going to briefly get into some of the details of what we found. But I'll start with an introduction to why this study was commissioned in the first place and provide some background of the two environments. And then I'll delve right in and sort of provide a view of some of the factors that we found to be required in a thriving fintech ecosystem. And then I'll go on and sort of present some thoughts on the role of organization design in the planning and mapping out of your ecosystem and provide some conclusions and recommendations for Nigeria for our own growth and development. So let me start with the introduction. This is part of a Digital Explorers program that seeks to enhance capacity of tech professionals in the Nigerian environment through work exchange programs with Lithuania. And so this program is being run by Ventures Platform in Abuja, but has a lot of other partners in the Lithuanian environment, including Africa. So what the program seeks to do is there's the human exchange component, but there's also a knowledge exchange component. How do we learn some of the practices or maybe even unlearn some of the mistakes that the Lithuanians have made in driving and building their own fintech ecosystem? So for those of you who don't know, Lithuania is one of the European states in the Baltic region and got its independence from Russia. But then when you think about Lithuania, it's a very small country. And what has happened over the years since 2016, when they decided to develop a fintech policy, was that they've attracted foreign fintechs into the country, one of the most popular ones being Revolt. They've been able to attract foreign fintechs into the country and create that ecosystem for building a high-tech environment and thriving in a high-tech environment. So that involves all the regulatory practices, the supervisory practices, and the whole enabling environment of doing business in Lithuania. Lithuania has succeeded basically by being able to attract fintechs into the country, but also with the EU zone, you have a block of countries that you automatically get access to. And so I'll share some of the ways they were able to adopt this and approach this. To date, Lithuania ranks second in the global fintech cities ecosystem, and they're second to none. So they're second to the United Kingdom in the European Union. And as we know, our own dear country, Nigeria, we also have the thriving fintech ecosystem, which we should be very proud of because we've seen some of the successes in our environment. So while I will call Lithuania's fintech ecosystem an ecosystem by design, as has been built organically from ground up, and we'll begin to explore some of the nuances and the differences in the approaches that we've both taken in doing this work in general. So what we did in the study was really about how do we approach the understanding and benchmarking the Lithuanian ecosystem alongside the Nigerian ecosystem. And we did that the concept of the study was really to explore, to think about the organization design and to sort of benchmark by proposing best and good practices. So in terms of doing this, we interviewed and spoke to key actors in the Lithuanian and Nigerian fintech ecosystems. And through these interviews, we did this in the space of 3 weeks. And through these interviews, we were able to explore and extract the nuances. And some of those nuances are the dimensions of our organization design that we're looking at today. The first is regulatory and supervisory framework. So how did regulation and supervision enhance the development of the ecosystem? Because since 2016, when Lithuania launched its own fintech ecosystem, they have over 200 plus fintechs operating in the country. And I think Nigeria has the same number from the last FINTECH study that was released earlier on this year. So what do we need to understand in terms of regulatory and supervisory frameworks? And then also looking at organization structure. And when we talk about organization structure, because we're thinking about an ecosystem, we're not just thinking about the organization itself, but we're thinking about the institutions that support the organization to ensure that this can work. We're also looking at skills and competencies, because at the end of the day, the knowledge, the capabilities, and the capacity that we need to drive and innovate are required in any ecosystem to be able to sustain it in general. And then we also need to think about engagement and outreach. So for example, this Nigeria FinTech Week is one of the engagement and outreach opportunities to get engaged with regulators as well as innovators and bring them into the same room, listening to the same conversations and learning from each other in a bid to shift the needle towards understanding better the practices, what innovation can do, again, without maintaining that integrity and stability of our financial systems. And the whole idea is we all learn. And in any of these studies, it's really about the benchmarking and the learning processes. What are the good practices? What are the best practices? And how can we imbibe those into our ecosystem so we can leapfrog some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that people had to learn the hard way? So I'll just jump right in and sort of go through the preliminary findings. And the first one I want to go through is the thriving fintech ecosystem. And when you think about a fintech ecosystem, we have to look at the various dimensions, and we use the PESTEL framework, which is looking at what are the political, economic, social, technology, environmental, and legal and regulatory dimensions to this, because an ecosystem like fintech is very complex. It's not just, there's no magic bullet to it. So we need to understand the whole environment to realize that we're not doing one thing that, again, has a trigger effect on another thing, and then we will not see the traction and the impact that we want to see until we look at the ecosystem holistically. On the political side, I think there's the issue about political will and ensuring that we have an enabling environment with legislation that works for everybody in general. We also need to understand that because the fintech organizations and processes and space spans across multiple regulatory authorities, financial services, digital technology and communications, NITDA, crime, financial crime and things, there needs to be institutional frameworks, because the enabling environment for someone who is doing business is, oh, I can go through policies and there's policy clarity around what I need to do. So I can start my business and take my product to market without having to go door to door and get that bureaucratic issues that slow me down. Another thing is that the economic and business landscape also needs to, example, doing business in Nigeria, right? How do we enhance our doing business in Nigeria factors to ensure that when people come and set up in Nigeria, they can focus on their business with the core competencies they have, rather than having to focus on externalities that are not really their core competence. We need to understand that we need to create a market environment that is competitive and open for everybody, so there's a level playing field. We can't protect or build monopolies. We need to break those down. We need to ensure that private sector is engaged. And then most of all, there needs to be access to capital, markets, and infrastructure. And all these three things sort of build that business landscape. But then again, the social landscape also has to work, because there needs to be that social infrastructure of education, well-being, good quality home environment. So right now we're all working from home and we're all having different challenges. Some offices have had to provide some financial support to their staff to enable them sort of set up a workspace at home and those kinds of things. We need to realize that we need digital work opportunities. We're in the fourth industrial revolution now. How do we begin creating some of these digital work opportunities? Because the whole idea is that these gaps that we see through the lack of development are also opportunities to develop new and innovative solutions. We need to think about consumer protection and redress mechanisms, because that's what builds that trust in our society. On the technology side, we can't say it enough. We need access to digital infrastructure. We need access to financial infrastructure. We need innovation environments that sort of help startup. It's almost like cloud computing environments for innovation that help startup test their ideas in a safe space without having to incur a lot of money. On the regulator side, we need that end-to-end processing in terms of technology for regulation or subtech. We need a startup ecosystem that really works and can incubate startups. And then also we think about digital talent. And again, this is different from just the programming talent, but even across board in terms of the different workspaces and environments, we need pure digital talent. On the environment side, we also need to think about sustainable banking principles, because whether we like it or not, that we need to be responsible institutions and responsible financial services in the marketplace. And we also need to realize that on the environment side, climate change is also one of the sticky problems that we need to deal with, that we can deal with FinTech. More so on the regulatory and legal side, as well as the enabling legislative environment, we also need expedient regulatory processes, right? We need we need a time cycle. You don't want somebody that's collected venture capital money to be waiting for a license for 2 years or 1 year, and not that. Regulatory clarity is also important, and policy clarity. We need to understand we need different regulatory instruments. We need to build a level playing field for fair competition. And then we also need that regulator agility and openness, which is more of a mindset change that I'll come back and talk about very briefly. So when we talk about the role of organization design, what does organization design do for us in the context of FinTech, right? When you speak to a regulator, one of the things they will always tell you is that, oh, we need to ensure that we're risk-based and we use rule-based supervision or principle-based supervision. But nobody is saying throw away the risk-based, but it's about being smart about it. How can we have insight-based regulation that is using more data rather than just reactive? How can we build test and learn environments like we see with regulatory sandboxes that give fintechs a safe space to come and work and test their products with some level of regulatory forbearance before they get into the licensing process? And that helps to stimulate that culture of, oh, we're co-creating, we're thinking things through, because we have the problems and the solutions that we need to use technology to address. On the organization structure side and institutional frameworks, we need to really think about how do our institutions work? Are we building integrated organizations that have that technology, that mainstreams technology knowledge and talent, or are we building fragmented silos or centers of expertise? Because don't forget that we always need to think about scale. FinTech is all about scale, the economies of scale. How do we build cooperative and collaborative institutions to ensure that we know what we're doing and we know where the handoffs are, but there's cooperation in that handoff because we see the end goal and the macroeconomic impacts in terms of job creation that a whole FinTech ecosystem can build for us? How do we think about our leadership and ownership? Who leads this initiative? Who owns it? Right? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the wherewithal? Do they have the presence to be able to carry through and make those kinds of decisions? When we think about skills and competencies, it's about people, yes. And people. We can't undermine the role of people in the environment that we work in today. But it's not just about people in terms of bodies. It's about quality, competent people that can think about products and services. And also, how do we think about our knowledge and our social learning cycle? How do we address problems? How do we ensure that there's feedback loops across to ensure that we can take things, harness them in terms of intellectual properties and create them, and then also diffuse them in terms, so we have the knowledge and experience in the mainstream. And then finally, we have the issue about engagement and outreach. And this is also important because there is a bridge between regulators and innovators. But then again, we need to come together and close those forces. So ecosystem partners like associations like the FinTech Association of Nigeria, events such as this Nigeria FinTech Week are also mechanisms towards engagement and outreach. And this is important because in any ecosystem, stakeholder management is critical to ensuring that everybody feels a part of it and everybody positively contributes to the development of that ecosystem. So in conclusion, what are the key recommendations for Nigeria? The first is we need to think of FinTech as a national public policy, right? We need to integrate FinTech on technology in general into how can we use this to short circuit our development problems. And then again, it does two things. We have the national FinTech strategy, but we have macroeconomic indicators like job creation to ensure that we can positively use our young workforce, right? And drive that young workforce into the marketplace to ensure that there's collective creative of knowledge, training and development. Then another thing we need to think about is we need to now start thinking and incubating technology incubators to solve our social and economic and developmental problems, because we can't do it without each other, right? Well, the problems that we have, how do we incubate services and solutions and competitions to ensure that we can actually address those issues? We need to backward integrate again, because when you think about our universities and the whole academic process, how do we build capacity? And one of the things we did when the full study is released is we actually sort of did a knowledge map. What are the key knowledge domains that you need in this ecosystem? And those knowledge domains span across business and management, they span across financial innovation, they span across regulatory and compliance, and as well. So, and then technology. So how do we continue to build the talent pool that we need to create quality services? Because if we're not mindful of the fact that people are mobile, and the whole idea of mobility is that before it was migration, but today with COVID-19 and things, you don't need to migrate anymore. You can stay at home and work for global businesses. So that brain drain and that mobility has to be recreated, and we need to recreate them at a pace that outpaces everybody else, so we can also be the labor supplier to African countries. And then finally, another recommendation is, how do we build these innovation environments that reduce the startup costs and enhance experimentation? So like I said, a cloud platform, cloud computing is pay as you use, right? So you can just go in there, test your solution, work it out and develop it in that space, and then you can work holistically. So those are some of the key recommendations for Nigeria, but it involves all of us working together, public sector, private sector, academia, and everybody else. But then again, I think the most fundamental for me in terms of what do we need to learn from this is the shifts that we all need to make. And some of these shifts are really about our policy directive. Can we move from just the financial systems or financial services to a more of a public policy approach? Can we think of the regulator more, rather than a regulator, but as an enabler of the whole ecosystem and innovation? Can we stop focusing on financial institutions only and focus on a whole ecosystem approach, civil society, regulators, government agencies? And then again, our systems need to be more simplified and less bureaucratic. Our institutional frameworks have to be cooperative and collaborative and co-creative. We need to think about digital processes across the government lines in terms of online processes end to end. And then also we need to think about dynamic regulation in terms of our priorities and shifts. Mindsets need to be open, supervisory approaches, insights-based, not just rule and principle. Regulatory approach should be more smart. And then again, from a data orientation perspective, we need to move to be a data-vorous organization and regulator. So basically, those are the key findings, and I will stop now for questions and comments. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello, Prof. Thank you very much. Although we lost you at the end, but thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation. I just said to myself, you know what, we have to ensure that these slides get distributed so that people can digest this great work of research that you delivered in under 20 minutes. Wow. I'll say to myself, maybe the Nigeria FinTech Week or the FinTech Association of Nigeria should actually enlarge the pastel for a thriving fintech ecosystem that you talked about and actually distribute it, across the industry, because, therein lies what you would call the miracle, or what the industry needs to further blossom. Thank you very much, Prof. Producer, I wonder if there are any questions for Prof. If they're not, then we'll just call it a day. We're just trying to check whether there are questions for you.
Okay.
But if they're not, we'll say thank you very much for the session. Just a moment to see whether there are any questions whatsoever. Well, Prof, this is well delivered. this is well delivered, and obviously you know quite a lot about the ecosystem, right?
Well, it's an occupational hazard.
You are hitting the right point.
It's an occupational hazard, but thank you all very much. And I think wow. The different partners and supporters, as you can see on the screen, this was brought to you through the Digital Explorers program, and these are the different partners and supporters. So it's a holistic program that looks at this issue about human exchange and knowledge exchange.
Okay, so there's a question just before you go.
Okay.
The question says, can you repeat the lessons learned from Lithuania and how it applies to Nigeria?
Well, you see, I think that the lessons learned with that, we have to be careful that we're not going to do a copy and paste, but everything has to be based within the context of the environments that we're in. And like I said, some of the recommendations are drawn out of lessons learned. So for example, Lithuania's fintech policy is almost like a national public policy initiative. So everyone, so the key actors are the Ministry of Finance, the National Bank of Lithuania, and then they have another institution called Invest Lithuania that actually is an organization that goes to attract foreign companies into the country. So theirs is almost like an incubation. Come and incubate your systems and services in Lithuania. Will give you access to digital infrastructure, right? Will give you access to the whole European payment system infrastructure. So they're making your entry and your onboarding easier for you. So you as a fintech, you're coming in there, it's almost like plug and play, right? And then you come in and you can do your business, do your innovation, build your markets without worrying about going desk to desk. And then because they're not a native English speaking country, and they know that they're attracting foreign companies, they've also digitized their licensing and approval processes end to end and made it in English. Okay, so you have to also demonstrate and show that good faith that you really want these people in. So as Invest Lithuania is talking to people and bringing companies in, the environment is enabling so you can actually come in, plug and play, and build your business and grow your business across Lithuania as well as Europe. So in Nigeria, we just have to think about what will work for us, okay? I'm not professing that this is, but we need to think and collectively as an ecosystem and as a team, what will work for us.
Wow, amazing, Prof. On point, on point. I'm going to reach out personally, but this is on point. Thank you, Prof, for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
It's just an exciting way and a great way to round up the morning session. Well delivered, well thought through, well researched.
Great, thank you.
Prof, there's a question for you, bro. Prof, but you just go. I know people don't want you to go. So how can you drive this same vision for the wider Africa?
Well, let's start at home first, all right? Success attracts success, right? So let's start at home.
And the person also added, AI and design structure for Nigeria and entire Africa to this.
You see, the thing about things like AI is that they're technologies that need to be applied to use cases, right? And that's why I said, if we think about how can we solve our social problems, our development problems, how can we address climate issues, then that's where those technologies will come in. But don't forget also, how do we support small startups in terms of having access to the right AI tools. And that's where the innovation environments come in. That's where the incubation comes in. So there are many mechanisms that we can use, but it's really about how do we build the platform for that innovation? And it's not just about physical platforms, but also the technology platforms. So for example, in Lithuania, the central bank has built a blockchain platform with consultants, blockchain vendors, and they're inviting innovators that come and test and see what blockchain can do. So that's what's going on. That's what I mean. So we have a lot of work to do anyway. So I think we need to round off now, right?
Okay, Prof, one last one before you run along. This says, how did talking about the Lithuania example, how did the organizational design help drive effective implementation, I guess, of the FinTech policy?
Their organizational design helped because, for example, they were open in terms of their regulatory and supervisory frameworks. They had the people, they had the leadership, they had the wherewithal. They had the institutional cooperation, when I say institutional cooperation, so they had three key leads, core leads, the Bank of Lithuania, the Ministry of Finance, and Invest Lithuania. But then they also had other institutions within other government departments and institutions. And they started building cooperative agreements with the different organizations. And you know, when something is successful, right? Everybody wants to be part of that party. So they were getting good media coverage, good press coverage, and everybody was like, oh, let me also key in and align with this FinTech initiative in general. So success attracts, right? But when you don't succeed, so then in terms of engagement, they use their Startup Lithuania community and all their hubs and ecosystems to build monthly engagements, for example, between the community and the regulators. And then I think the final thing I'll say is that in Lithuania it was a bit easier because they have a super regulator. The National Bank of Lithuania regulates banking, finance, insurance, pensions and everything. So it was almost like a one-stop shop, but they were also focused in the sense where they started with payments and then they're evolving to other financial services in terms of the FinTech drive.
Amazing, Prof. That is where we draw the curtains for this. Thank you very much for your time again. Thank you for that beautiful presentation, spot on. This certainly deserves to be heard, across board, and I will reach out to you, Prof. Thanks a lot. On that note, we will round off this morning session. Thank you all for your time, for staying with us this far. The afternoon session starts at exactly 4 p.m. That session is actually a power-packed session, and you don't want to miss it. So we will have, first and foremost, the CFO and the CFO of Safricom, Sitoyo, and he's also the interim CEO of M-Pesa, the world acclaimed M-Pesa. We also have the CEO of Jay's Bank. We also have the CEO of Nine Mobile. We have an AFDA expert. We have someone from Glenbrook Partners and country manager Uzotech. Also, side by side, because it's a parallel session, side by side, we also have Matt Flannery of Branch International giving the keynotes for the afternoon session. We have to look by Osinderu of Branch International, Providus Bank, ALX, Swish, and then Palm Pay. It promises to be exciting. Use the hashtag NFW2020 and hashtag Nigeria FinTech Week, hashtag day 4. We'll round off day 4 with the last session at 4 p.m. Don't forget to interact with the platform. You can chat with the likes of Professor David West and other speakers and also other attendees. You're free to chat with them. You're free to reach out to them, set up a meeting. That's what the platform provides for you. See you all by 4 p.m. and thank you for staying with us this far. See you all. Bye.